As well, try and do long brush strokes where you can. That's going to help your color stay smooth. Now I have this, again, this tiny area down here. You can see now I'm using this little corner of the brush right here instead of using the entire edge. This is a little bit smaller and a little bit more precise for the area that I am trying to color in. Now my cat is wearing I'm going to say maybe like a cream colored white shirt. So that means I'm just going to color in his paws and probably his body here. As well the legs. Don't want to forget about the legs. I think I'm going to have just enough of the color that I'm using. But if you feel that you need to make more as you're going, please don't hesitate to stop and make more of your color. Okay, there we go. If you have a tail like me, don't forget to fill that in too. I'm going to be adding stripes and more details to the tail later. Right now, I'm focused only on just getting a color down. All right, looks pretty good. Now, if you feel that maybe your color is a little bit too light, you can always go back in and add a second layer. Now, I'm going to do it right now just so that you can see, but I would recommend that you wait for this to dry first because otherwise your paper will start to tear. So sometimes if you realize your color has dried a little lighter than you intended, you can always go back in and just add a little bit more, but you do want to be careful. Remember, your paper is very, very wet. And if it starts to crumble, that's your cue, your sign that that spot is too wet and it will tear. Again, just showing you what you can do once your area has dried and maybe you want to add another layer to it. So you can see adding another layer, especially in watercolor, can be really beneficial. It can make that base layer a little darker, stands out a little more if you want it to. Okay, down to the feet. There we go. To me, this guy, my character, kind of reminds me of like an Animal Crossing villager. I wonder what yours looks like, what it reminds you of. Okay, almost there, we just got the tail. All right, looking good. So now, while we wait for that to dry, let's go ahead and fill in some other parts of our character. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and fill in I think I'm gonna fill in the clothes right now while the area around my face is drying. So for the clothes, I'm gonna I know I want sort of a light color here on the sleeves, and I want a dark color for the vest. Then for the belly, I'm probably gonna keep it again sort of the same color so it all looks like it goes together. Now I'm thinking that I actually want to do a little bit of shading on the arms instead of filling in the entire sleeve with a color. So I'm going to go ahead and mix myself up a color I want to shade with. This can be any color, and you could do this too if you're doing a white article of clothing. And what I'm going to do with it is I'm barely going to place this color onto the sleeves. I'll show you what I mean. Oh, also, I used a little bit of red and brown and yellow when I mixed that paint. So with this color, I'm just going to go on the inside of the arm with my small brush. I'm just adding a little bit on the sides here, just to kind of show that there's definitely a sleeve, and it's definitely round, but it's a white material. So you can see I'm kind of taking my brush back and forth. I always really like the look of a brush stroke kind of when you're shading in these areas. I think it looks kind of interesting, but if you're going for more of a smooth look, just go back and forth a couple of times, really pet gently, and you should be golden. I'm going to take again my small brush into these areas. I'm just kind of outlining the outside there. And then this is more towards the bottom, so I'm going to probably fill in a little more of it. There we go. Now if you want to blend that out ever so slightly, take your brush with just water on it, very gently pet the area where your color and the white of your paper meet. You don't want to go over this area too many times because again, it might cause your paper to tear, but that will help you blend the color a little bit. This works best when this area is still wet. All right, next I'm going to go ahead and fill in my vest. I think I just want this to be sort of like a dark brown color, kind of like a dark umber. So I'm going to use brown, the tiniest bit of black. I'm going to mix that together, make sure I maybe have a little bit more. And I'll put that on the vest. Now I'm using a very small brush for this part because I want to be very accurate. There's a lot of little nooks and crannies that I don't want to use a big brush to sort of try and get into. So if you have a smaller brush, you can feel free to use them for the part where you're filling in your clothes. Okay, almost there. Again, I'm not using a lot of water here. The trickiest thing about watercolors, I think, is sort of mastering what is too much water and what is too little water. Here we go. While I'm at it, I'll fill in the bow tie. Why not? We'll do a red bow tie. I'm gonna do this pure red color instead of the red orange. So I'm taking this very pointy part of my brush right here. I'm using that to fill in the bow. I happen to get a lot of this color on my brush. I also think this red is just very pigmented. That means it has like a lot of red in it. So it turned out quite dark, quite beautiful, I think. All right, so take as long as you need to fill in your clothes and any other little items maybe on the body, and kind of inspect your face of your character. If it's dry enough, let's go ahead and work on these different features here. I'm gonna go ahead and start on my eyebrows and my eyes because that's the part I really like to work on first, but you can start maybe somewhere else if you feel so inclined. So for me, I wanna do a gradient on the inside of the eyes. I think I want the top part to be a dark color and the bottom part to be a light color. I think I'm gonna want the top part to be purple. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and grab some purple with a small brush, and I am just going to put that on the top part of the color of the eye, like this area here. Now before I get all the way down, I'm gonna wash off my brush. I'm gonna do this quickly. I'm gonna pick up a little bit of this regular blue and I'm gonna place a couple stripes of that right here in the middle. Then, really fast, I'm gonna clean off my brush again. I'm gonna get this turquoise color, a light blue, and I'm gonna fill in the rest of the eye with that. Now to blend, again, you can get maybe a little blue on your brush. I'm gonna use my brush with just water because this area is still quite wet. I'm just gonna pet those colors until they blend together. If maybe a little bit of the color moves and I didn't want it to, I'll pick up like a purple or a blue. I'm just petting the colors. They blend. Now it looks like on the camera that the purple is kind of overpowering the blue, but I promise you, in real life, the blue and the purple are very much going in a gradient. That is a change in color. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other eye. Now you can use this technique and use this way of coloring with lots of other colors. You could do blue to green or green to yellow. You could even do brown to red or brown to orange or brown to yellow. Experiment with the different colors and kind of find out what you like. Right, taking that turquoise color again, putting it on the bottom, being really careful. Now I'm going to blend. Thinking I need a little bit more of my blue color I used to change from the purple. Put that there as well. There's just a lot of blending back and forth. You might have to have a lot of patience for this process, but it's so worth it in the end. So it looks really pretty. So I'm all done with my eyes. I'm going to go ahead and move on and color in my eyebrows. For my eyebrows, I'm probably going to use like a gray or a black. I might mix a little bit of brown into it, but I do want them to be quite dark. So super careful. I'm going to take that color and fill in my eyebrows with it. Again, you can kind of decide what color you want to use for your own character. It doesn't have to be the one that matches mine. Okay. While I'm at it, since I just made that color, I'll fill in my top hat. It's a little light, so I'm going to take more black. Just sort of put that in there. There we go. All right, so let's go ahead and I'm going to fill in my mustache. So for my mustache here, I want it to be a color that complements the orange fur that I made for my cat. So I do want it to be a dark color, the one that maybe matches the eyebrows. So I'm going to do this dark brown color here. Might mix like the teeny tiniest little bit of black into it just to make it a little more muted, but dark brown is what I want it to be. So that way it's still sort of in the same like warm color without being too brown and too far away from this color scheme that I kind of have going on here. Taking that over to the other side. Filling that in. All right. Now, if you want to add some shading right now, you can do this if you'd like. It doesn't matter if this is dry yet. You can take a darker color. So for me, that's just going to be more brown mixed with black. And you can sort of add in these short lines to shade. Not only will it kind of help with the texture of a mustache or a part of the fur, if that's something you wanted to do. Also looks really good for the shading. So it gives texture, but it also shades, kind of like what we did for Totoro. Ta-da! All right, got another part I want to color in, which is the nose and the ears. They're going to be the same color, and I'm going to do, I think, a light pink So I'm going to take some red. I'm just going to add a lot of water to it. Now that's pretty darn red, but I think I wanted a little bit more on the blue side. So I'm going to take just a teeny tiny bit of blue. I'm going to mix that in. It won't turn it purple just yet, but instead it's just going to make the pink a little softer, in my opinion. And then I will fill in the inside parts of the ears with this, as well as the nose. Now, your cat's fur, or your animal's fur, or if you did a person, the skin, should be dry by the time we finish filling in all this extra stuff. I want you to now give it a little inspection. Is it dry? Is it dry enough? It's dry enough for me, which means I can add shading there now. The top hat. It's gonna add a little purple there. There we go, much better. All right, so now for the fur, we do want it to have a little bit of shading because it's gonna make it stand out more. Right now, he's looking really, really flat. So what you're gonna do is you're going to mix up your fur color again, or the color that you use to fill in the skin. You're noticing probably that I'm still using the small brush, and that is no accident. I do need the small brush to do the shading. Then I'm gonna add in more brown than I did last time. I'm gonna mix that all up. Now with this color, I want you to sort of inspect where you think the shading should go. Now shading depends a lot on where your light source is. So my light source is kind of coming from the top and maybe a little bit over to the side. So that would be like where the sun or a light would be coming from. So that means my shadows are all gonna be on the left of my character. So I'm gonna take my brush with the shadow color on it, and I am going to add just a couple of lines, a little space for the shadow to exist here on the left side of my very grumpy cat. As well, because my light source is kind of coming from on top of here, I will have to also add shading to the bottom of his chin and underneath his mustache. I can also feel free to add a little bit underneath the eyes. I can add some to this part right here to kind of show the roundness of the head and the ear being attached to it. You can kind of do the same thing on the other side, the other ear. And I can also add a little bit maybe on the nose here to kind of show that the nose is pointing out. I can add some here too to show the eyebrows are really pressed together, to show his grumpiness. I'm going to add a little bit of the shading as well underneath the eye on this side. Maybe even underneath the eyebrows. All right. Next, let's go ahead and do the work onto the body. So as well, I'm going to have to add shading on the hand here. I'm going to have to add it on this side of the body, on the left side of the leg, and even on the bottoms of the feet. And even onto the belly here. Now, if you're like me, the tail is very skinny, so I'm going to be super careful and add just basically a line of shading onto the tail. Right here. Just going to make that a little bigger. Maybe add some to the parts where the paw on the bottom here is connecting to the leg. Ooh, and I can't forget this other hand, of course. All right, so now I'm just kind of checking and seeing if that's all I wanted to add. It is. So now I'm going to think about shading on other parts of my picture. So I'm thinking I might need to add some shading inside the ears too. So I have my color from before, thankfully. I'm going to take a little bit of red, mix that in, take a little bit more blue this time. And now it is going to look slightly more purple because now I've added much more blue. And I'm going to add that to the inside of the ear to make a shadow. You could even add some to the bottom of the nose. If you want, you can also add further shading to your clothing. I know we talked about it a little bit when we first made the clothes, especially if you have white areas. But for me now, I'm going to add more of the shading to places like the vest. So I mixed up a little bit of darker color. I used black and brown again, but this time much more black. I'm just adding a little bit of it to the sides and edges to make a shadow. Now you will need to wait for this to dry, and what you can do once it's completely dry is you can add now more texture with color pencil. So I'm going to go ahead and set my watercolors aside and take out my color pencil to show you. Now again, your picture needs to be completely dry for you to do this, but with color pencil, you can choose a color like maybe orange, because I have an orange cat. And you can add stripes or lines on the fur. And anything like that. You can also add vertical lines on like the belly, on the sides of the legs. Again, to just kind of show the texture here. Okay. So I'm thinking I might want to add like stripes on his head here on the side. I'm taking the orange, I'm just going to fill that in a little bit. It might be kind of hard to see just on the camera, but I promise you it's there. I'm adding texture lines onto the ears, a little bit onto the head here. And you can do the same thing for like other parts of your picture. So like for the mustache, I could add in black hatching lines for texture. I could do the same thing on the clothes. As well, you could even use the color pencil to add shading into areas maybe you weren't comfortable with doing in watercolor. That's also completely fine. Thinking I might want to add some hatching lines onto the eyebrows to kind of give the appearance of hair. And there we go. So again, I'm not going to do the background with you. You're instead going to pick a color that you want to do for it, but I will show you my example from before just so that you kind of have an idea of what we did. So here's my little guy we made today. Here's our little guy who was our example. So for the background, you can add like a shadow. Of course, maybe you added like a scene for your cartoon character to be in, so you can color that in however you like. You could use marker, watercolor, color pencil, even acrylic paint if you have it. Otherwise, if you are just more focused on your character, you can leave your background blank. And that's it. That's the project. So I hope you guys had a lot of fun drawing your cartoon figures and making your own cartoon characters and expressions. I'll see you guys next time where we draw a cartoon place. We're going to be making SpongeBob's house and talking about a little bit how cartoon places can be made out of lots of different things. So happy drawing. I'll see you next time. Bye.